Today, I'm speaking with April, another woman who chose to birth free of the medical system with her first child. I absolutely love these stories, and I mention it often because it goes to show that you do not have to have your first baby in the hospital just in case, or so that you can know what it's like. On April's journey to birthing free, she hit a few speed bumps when she was at first looking for a medical provider. She wasn't accepted into any midwifery groups due to lack of insurance. She finally found a medical midwife that would take her without insurance, but was then ghosted by her. And then when she finally found a birth center to birth at, she was risked out of their care after they diagnosed her with gestational diabetes, even though she had the deep, deep feeling that her baby was perfectly okay. After all of that, April stuck to her original decision to birth her baby at home with her husband, and in an almost non-eventful birth experience, April birthed her son freely into her mother's hands. Then, feeling so excited about the experience of doing it herself, April was ready right away to bring another child into the world. After almost 3 years of time, April did get pregnant with her daughter, but not before experiencing an early pregnancy release that she handled at home. This is a very beautiful story of April's trust in her natural instincts and the fact that her body is perfectly made to birth her babies. Hello, April, and welcome to the Free Birthing in Color movement. I am very grateful that you are here and you're about to share your story of birthing your daughter and just being another piece to this beautiful mosaic of women of color and Indigenous women sharing how they are birthing in their power.
Hello, Karma. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for holding this space. It's super duper needed. For one, as a woman of color, but also as a free birthing mother in general, it's so hard to be able to share your story.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's just get straight into it because I'm always so excited to hear mothers' stories. So the first question that I would like to ask you is, what is your ancestry that you are passing down to your child?
Okay, so my husband, he's Vietnamese American.
Mhm.
He's first generation, and
Mhm.
then I am Black American. You know, I don't typically use the term African American only because I know that there are people who actually know their heritage from there, and I
Mhm.
unfortunately, because of colonialism, don't know mine.
Mhm. Yeah, that's okay. Black
Mm.
American is fine. Thank you for sharing that. That's very beautiful. And the next question I would love to ask you is, where does your motherhood journey begin?
So I've known that I wanted to be a mother since I was a little girl.
Mhm.
That has, I guess the progression of that has changed over time. When I was little, I said I would adopt kids, and maybe one day I will. I didn't think I'd have biological kids, but spoiler alert, I have two. So yeah, about the time that I hit puberty, I was like, okay, I for sure want biological kids.
Mm,
And then in my late 20s, my husband and I were able to agree that it was time to start.
okay. Wonderful. And do you want to get into the story of your first pregnancy? Like, how did that come to be when you and your husband decided? Did you just kind of say, let's start getting pregnant and try right away? Or did you like change your lifestyle and do some stuff in the preconception before you actually got pregnant? How did that look for you?
So when I was about, I'll be 33 this year, but when I was about 26, my husband and I decided that we were going to try for a baby.
Mhm.
And all kinds of things happened. I lost my job that I'd had for 5 years.
Mm,
We went through a rough patch in our marriage. We moved to Atlanta, and so we stopped trying for a while.
okay.
And then we live in California now, and so we moved back to California. We decided to work on things, and we decided to start trying pretty quickly after. I did change my lifestyle a little bit, probably not enough in hindsight,
Mhm.
because I was working two jobs. It was like a really hectic time. But
Mhm.
I did start eating a little bit healthier, and I went online and found like a knocked up smoothie that's supposed to help you get pregnant faster, and I guess it worked.
Okay. Wow.
And so, yeah, I started being a little bit more active. I was working in retail, which helped me to be active. I had started like kind of walking on my breaks and walking to work
Mm-hmm.
because I, you know, honestly have been a pretty sedentary person throughout most of my life.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yeah. And so at that time, my mom, her husband, may he rest in peace, he was battling lung cancer.
Oh, wow.
And I'm mentioning that for a reason. So he was battling that at that point and at the time that we were trying.
Mm-hmm.
And so in about February of 2019, I guess he was getting toward the end of his journey.
Mm-hmm.
And around that time, I started having these dreams. I had three of them.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen him because I was working so much. We saw him once or twice, but around January, February, I hadn't had a chance to really see him.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a dream and it was really strange. It was like I was standing in what looked like a high school,
Yeah.
and there was a long hall, and there was like fluorescent light at the end of it. Like the hallway was mostly dark, but there was fluorescent light at the end of it, and he started walking toward it.
Mm-hmm.
And I woke up and I was like, I don't think that's a good sign.
Mm.
I'm like, somebody walking toward the light, that's, and I
Mm-hmm.
was maybe I was like, I don't know, that, dreams, right? And then I had a second dream and it was him like laying on a bed and he couldn't speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so I woke up from that. He was trying to tell me something, but he couldn't speak. And I woke up from that dream and I was like, that's really strange.
Mm.
And then I had a third dream of him and he was telling me, take a test, just take a test.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, what? No. And he was like, just take a test, just take it. And I was like, I don't know, whatever. And I did in the dream, and it had like one really strong pink line, the control line, and then a faint pink line. And I was like, wow. And I woke up from that dream and I'm like, oh my God.
Mm.
So I called my mom to check in and ask her how things were going. And, obviously things weren't going very well. And then eventually she told me that he had passed. And I was like, wow.
Mm.
So I had started feeling like a little funny, but just like a little. I've always had digestion issues, so I didn't
Mm.
think too much of it.
Mm-hmm.
We went to the funeral that passed. March comes and I missed my period.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm like, uh, I'm like, I don't know, whatever. Like they can be late.
Mm.
Mine usually aren't, but I'm like, hey.
Mm.
And so I also had an aunt who had cancer, and I went to go visit her.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, I had a feeling that I was pregnant. On the way there, I was with it was my great aunt who was sick, and my aunt was taking me, my mom's sister.
Okay.
And so we went together. And while we were driving, we passed like Chick-fil-A or something. And the thought of it, I was like, ugh. And I was
Mm.
like, that's weird. I'm like, huh. And for some reason, I had a little nagging voice that was telling me to whisper. My great aunt, she couldn't speak at this point, but something was telling me, like, just tell her that you think you're pregnant, like, just whisper it in her ear. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, that's strange. I was like, I don't like, what is that?
Mm-hmm.
And I was about 4 days late at this point. I was like, okay, well, you know what? I was like, if I don't get it tomorrow, I'll take a test that morning. So the next morning, I took a test, hands shaking,
Mm.
just freaking out, and it it was a digital test. I was like, I don't want any I don't want any issues.
Yeah.
I don't want to be trying to interpret this test. So it said pregnant, and I was just like, no, no. And I just like turned it all around looking for the knot, but there
Mm.
was not.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say it's really interesting because at that point it just feels like the spiritual portal just kind of opened up.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So then what were your next steps after you found out that you were pregnant then?
So weirdly enough, I had been on crunchy vibes for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of figured I probably wanted a natural pregnancy and birth, but for whatever reason, I didn't think about contacting a midwife. I just jumped into the kind of old conventional thinking that like I don't know I'm actually pregnant. I have to have it confirmed. So
Mm-hmm.
I started contacting OBs. And funny enough, contacting OB offices is what got me on the path to finding a midwife because I
Okay.
didn't have insurance at the time. I was working as a temp.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was making plenty because I worked two jobs and, it was good work. It just was temporary. And so I would contact the office and I'd say, hey, I need an appointment. I think I'm pregnant. Do I need an ultrasound? I don't know how this works, but I don't have insurance. And they would have so much attitude with me. I think it was the fact that, like, I was saying that I only wanted one appointment. They're like, you have to be here for the whole time. She would have to deliver your baby. They're like,
Mm.
and you need to have insurance. And I was just like, whoa, okay. So I was like, I'm done looking for OBs. We're not doing this. I was like,
Yeah.
if this is how I'm being treated over the phone, what's going to happen when I'm in the office?
No kidding. They haven't even met you yet. Wow.
Yeah. Mhm. And so I ended up looking up home birth and I ran across Laura Shanley of Unassisted Birth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be totally honest, I've never read the book.
Okay. Me neither. So don't worry.
But her website really resonated with me. And I was like, oh, why have I never thought of this before? I'm like, of course you could give birth unassisted. Why wouldn't you be able to do that? So I did more searching. I found YouTube videos of some women who had wild pregnancies.
Mm,
And I was like, I want to do this. It immediately clicked. No
mm,
worries, no fear, nothing. Immediately clicked. I was like, I think this is what I need to do.
yeah.
And in that time, I had a dream that I had a midwife and partway during, and I was in the pool. I was supposed to have a water birth, and
Mm,
partway during that birth, I the midwife disappeared,
mm,
and then I wasn't in the pool anymore. I was just giving birth like on a
mm.
bed.
Okay.
And so that was interesting. And so I'm like, okay, I could do this. And I talked to my husband about it, and he's like, are you insane? He's like, no, that he's like, you need some kind of help. What are you talking about?
Mm,
And so, since he was freaked out about it, I decided to find a midwife.
okay.
I contacted a home birth midwife, and she said that she had to take you whether or not you had insurance. She had some kind of program with the state, and she could only ask that you pay whatever you could. And I was like, okay, whatever your suggested fee is, I'll pay it. I just don't have insurance. Like, it's
Yeah.
not like I'm trying to tip you. I just don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to have an appointment with her, and I tried contacting her again because I couldn't remember the exact date of the appointment, and like I got nothing, and I couldn't find her again.
Seriously?
Yeah, it
Did
was
you
really,
already pay her or no?
no, I hadn't paid
Okay, you
anything
hadn't
yet.
paid.
It was supposed
Okay.
to be consult.
Oh, wow. So she
Used to
just
be there.
ghosted you.
Yes.
Whoa.
Okay. And believe it or not, in Crunchy, California, it is pretty hard to find midwives, or it was then. I think it's a little better now.
Okay.
Um, and so then I contacted a birth center and I was like, well, this is great because I live in an apartment and I probably don't want to give birth in my apartment anyway. I'm like, at the birth center, they can, like, we'll have the prenatal appointments and that'll satisfy my husband. And I'm like, and they can clean everything up. I'm like, I don't even care about the prenatal care.
Mm-hmm.
They can just clean up after the birth, whatever.
Yeah.
So we do that. We go with them, and everything is going well at first. I do mention to them that my mom had gestational diabetes when she was pregnant with me, and so I'm like, that might be a thing. I don't know.
Mm. Okay.
And so they're like, okay, well, that's fine. We can test you for that. It's not a big deal, whatever. We're pretty natural here. Everything's easygoing. We had 45-minute appointments. Everything was pleasant. They'd offer me tea.
Mm.
I was able to do my monthly payments. Everything's going well.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, I asked about the whole gestational diabetes thing again, and they were like, oh, you can have your HbA1c done. And I'm going to be honest, because I was working so much, I was a terrible patient, and I never
Okay.
went and got that test done. I
Okay.
kept forgetting about it. And so, and then when I got to like my mid second trimester, I was like, well, are you going to, because my mom told me that back in the day, her OB
Mm-hmm.
palpated her belly to see the size of the baby.
Okay.
And I asked my midwife if she could do that. And she did not do that, but she did measure my belly. And I was measuring ahead. My fundal height was measuring ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
And And at my first, or at my, what was supposed to be my one and only ultrasound,
Hmm.
he measured ahead also. I thought I was due November 11th, and it was showing that he should be due November 1st.
Okay. Okay.
And so she was concerned. She's like, "You're measuring ahead. We don't know how big the baby is, yada, yada." And I was like, "Well, I don't want to have another ultrasound."
Did she say how much the baby was measuring ahead? Because that's also very common and normal when you're just doing like fundal measurement and
So
ultrasound.
he was measuring 2 weeks ahead. And at one point, they told me 4 weeks ahead.
Okay.
And so,
And okay, so when you're saying measuring ahead, you're talking about the actual date of when your baby's meant to be due, not the actual fundal height measurements. Is that what, or like they're, sorry, can you just explain that a bit more?
no, it's okay. So the actual fundal height. So I guess,
Okay.
like, let's say at 28 weeks, I was
Yeah.
measuring at 30.
Okay. And that's totally normal, honestly. So yeah, that's very that's very normal. And most people, when they do fundal height measurements in that way, they usually often do it wrong. So the measurement is like there's a variability between that it can be give or take. But anyways, I'm not saying this to like say that you're wrong or they're wrong. I'm just explaining it for listeners to know that like if the fundal height isn't exactly matching up with the week that you're meant to be in your pregnancy, that's totally fine unless it's something like you're 28 weeks but you're measuring 36. Then it's like okay, there's something in there that's a bit, could be multiples, but or something else. But yeah, usually if it's like 2 or 3 centimeters above or below, that's totally excuse me, that's totally normal and fine.
So for the most part, I think I was usually measuring 2 to 3. One of the times she said 4, but that
Hmm.
4 measurement, I felt like that midwife was rushing me a little bit. And one
Yeah.
of the reasons I was a little bit kind of like, I don't know about this, is because she had trouble finding my pubic bone.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that
So
makes
I'm like,
sense.
I don't know. And
Hmm.
also, I did ask because I carried differently at different times. Like I carried very forward, and sometimes my son, he would kind of press his body forward.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that would be very like, I don't know if you know what I mean. Like it would just kind of be very like pronounced in the front. Like I would feel
Hmm.
my whole body kind of shifting forward
Okay.
during
Yeah.
in my pregnancy.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, so and then when I did my finger sticks, I got some high glucose numbers. And
Okay.
so they went ahead and tested me. I mean, they went ahead and diagnosed me with gestational diabetes.
Yeah.
And so eventually she ended up they ended up feeling like I was too high risk, and so they risked me out. And it was a
Really?
little bit of a, yeah, it
I,
was quite a process. So I didn't get risked out until I was about 36 weeks along.
really?
Yeah, and
Ugh.
part of that was because I didn't want to have OB care,
Yeah. Okay.
and I didn't want to go and get another ult. I got two ultrasounds, which I was already only supposed to get one,
Hmm.
and I didn't want to get any more.
Yeah.
And I yeah, and one of my numbers was too high. And it was
Hmm.
pretty high. I'm not gonna sit here and say that it wasn't. It was
Yeah.
pretty high. But for
Hmm.
me and my instincts, I felt like the baby was okay.
Yep.
And so I just decided to go with that.
Hmm.
Um, take it how you will, but I do
Yeah.
want to be honest and put that out there that I most for the most part my numbers were in control. I also did forget to take my numbers a lot. I was a bad patient. A bad patient, because I know that
Hmm.
birth is not a medical event. I mean,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah. So but I leaned into my instincts,
Hmm.
and I felt like he was okay. I felt like he was fine. And I had to really, really trust also because I had a placenta that was in the front. So I
Okay.
didn't feel tons of movement in my pregnancy. I felt
Okay.
some, and there was movement, but I didn't feel all the little kicks and bumps and seeing little shoulders and elbows and stuff the way that most women do.
Hmm.
And so when I was about 37 weeks, I told my husband that we would do the entrance exam for Medi-Cal, because
Okay.
here in California, if you are not qualified for Medi-Cal, usually because your income is too high, you qualify during pregnancy because they want to
Oh,
make
okay.
sure that you're able to get prenatal care.
Right. Okay.
And so I said we would do the entrance visit for that, but I was like, I still don't want OB care. I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and give birth at home the way that I originally wanted to do it. And so I asked him if he was okay, and he said he was okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, hmm,
Here we
yeah,
go.
we're gonna throw this together. So I worked two jobs up until I was about 7.5 months,
Oh,
and
wow.
then I went down to one.
Hmm.
And so we were shopping for birth supplies, and I had like an hour and a half commute. Like it was a crazy, crazy time.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was an insane time, but I got through it, and here you go. And I
Hmm.
honestly feel like my son's personality, and now that he's here and I see him, I'm like, okay, I see it and I see you. Like he was
Hmm.
showing me then, because I really wanted to work. I didn't feel
Okay.
miserable, like, oh, this is so awful, I have to work so much. I kept wanting to work. I
Okay.
was like, I just gotta go. I gotta do this. I want to work. And he's a little busybody, so I see where that energy was coming from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I guess I'll just go ahead and oh, and I also wanted to say with my midwives, it was an interesting thing.
Hmm.
Even besides the blood glucose thing, I feel like there were some red flags anyway. And I
Okay.
ignored them because of the fact that I really didn't care about the prenatal care. I had already had the dream that he was okay. And
Hmm.
I knew it in my heart that he was okay.
Yeah.
And so I didn't care about that aspect of things. I just, like I said, wanted to be able to use the pool there, and I wanted to
Hmm.
be able to have them clean up everything.
Right. Yeah. And what were those red flags that you did notice but just didn't mind?
So before I did the whole like finger stick thing, I had called one time earlier in my pregnancy, and I'm like, "Hi, I forgot what I was even calling for," and she kind of answered like, "Who is this?"
Hmm.
And
Okay.
I'm just like, I thought that was strange, but I'm like, they have other women, pregnant women. I'm like, not a big deal.
Hmm.
And also remember, she wasn't going to take my fundal height without me asking if she could tell the size of my baby. She kind of remembered to do that because I asked.
Hmm.
And there was one point in my pregnancy also that she was kind of pushing me to have a doula.
Okay.
And I went back and forth about whether I wanted a doula because I've heard that they're so great, but I really knew that like I wanted privacy. I'm a
Mm.
pretty private person anyway, and I
Okay.
knew that I didn't want it. Like it would be hard for me to get help from a stranger.
Okay. Yeah.
And during the course of your pregnancy, you can't get to know somebody on that level.
Okay.
My mom and my husband were supposed to be the ones in attendance at my birth, and she was just kind of like, you need a doula. And she was also pushing birth education, which I really didn't have time for, if I'm going to be honest.
Hmm.
And it's expensive.
Hmm.
A lot of the classes are between $300 and $500, and I was just like, I don't know.
Hmm.
And so she was pushing a doula, and at one point in my appointment she tells me, well, I'm going to be checking on you, I can't support you. And I'm just like,
What? She said that?
good.
Whoa.
And so I'm just like, first of all, I didn't ask you to. Like, my husband and my mom are supposed to be there. I know that it'll be his first baby, so he might be kind of freaked out, but it's like I didn't feel
Mhm.
like I needed that much support. Like, I
Right.
felt like, I just needed to do my thing. But also, it's just kind of like, okay, I'm hiring you as the person to attend my birth. I'm not really understanding, if I'm the
Hmm.
one giving birth, what you're doing to where that's so important to where you would be unable to support me. It was just kind of a bizarre thing.
Yeah, that's a really not great thing to hear from your midwife. Like, yes, she is meant to, like, they're trained to check women, but also the support aspect should just be built into, who she is and how she is providing her work for pregnant and birthing women. That's like crazy to me that she would say that.
You would think so, but I mean,
Wow.
so
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Uh, yeah, so I guess I'll just go into that first birth.
Hmm.
So it's funny, a couple of days before I actually ended up giving birth, the job that I was working at, they held a potluck for me because it was almost time for me to go.
Okay.
And so the night before that potluck, I had a dream that or that my baby was coming. I didn't know he was a boy. We kept the
Mhm.
gender a secret, a
Mhm.
surprise until then.
Mhm.
And I was like, please just let these people, they're trying to do something nice for us. Please just hang on a little
Mhm.
longer. And so he did. And then my last day of work, I started having contractions. Or no, I
Mhm.
had bloody show. I
Okay.
had bloody show. And I don't know why it never even occurred to me to call out. I just went anyway. I was
Mhm.
like, well, I don't feel anything yet. I should be able to make it through the day.
Mhm.
Um, about a few hours before it was time for me to go home, I started having like contractions, and I had a yoga ball that I was able to sit on at my desk instead of a
Mhm.
desk chair.
Mhm.
And so I was just like swirling around on my yoga ball while at work and feeling these light contractions. And I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, I just was having these like contractions and rolling around on the ball, and I text my husband because he was at work also that you might need to leave a little early
Mhm.
and I might be feeling something, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
And I was not scared, I was excited.
Mhm.
And so again stayed until it was time for me to leave. I don't know what I was thinking, but okay. And so okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And so on the car ride home we stopped at the grocery store and got some snacks because I'm like, I'll need some stuff for labor. I'll need to eat.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was like shoveling everything in my mouth. I could not stop eating.
Mhm.
And then we on the way home we also stopped at two Targets
Mhm.
because I had ordered stuff online to pick up for the birth.
Mhm.
And so we stopped at one and picked stuff up, and we stopped at the other, and I was like looking for the stuff that I needed, and the contractions started getting a little heavier. I had to stop every once in a while.
Mhm.
And my husband's like, "Are you okay? Do we need to go home?" I'm like, "No, we need to get this stuff. I'll be fine." Go. And then we get home and I start putting the stuff away because I'm like, I don't know what's taking him so long to get out of the car. I was like, let me put this stuff away.
Mhm.
And he comes in and he's like, why aren't you in bed? Go to bed. He's like, aren't I was like, okay, I guess you're right. So I get to our bedroom
Mhm.
and they hit me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I guess my body was like, okay, we're here, we're safe. And they
Mhm.
hit and they
Mhm.
really hit. So by the time we get home, it's about 9 o'clock. And they started getting really intense and I was like, okay, I can breathe through them. And I was like, oh no, I can't. And so I was really tired because I hadn't gotten much sleep the night before. And I was like, oh crap.
Mhm.
So I'm like walking around. I try to sit down, I try to lay down, and I couldn't do it. I
Mhm.
had to get up, I had to walk. I was
Mhm.
shaking my body, I was jogging in place, I was twerking.
Mhm.
All those
Mhm.
things helped with the intensity of the contractions. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God. And so eventually I got to a place where I was like, my husband, he's like, just breathe. And I just turned to him and I was like, don't tell me how to breathe. And so eventually I just was like, okay. I was like, this is not what I wanted for myself. I did not want to be like freaking out and to be like this intense. I was like, I need to calm down.
Mhm.
So I sit on the edge of the bed and I'm like, okay. I was like, let me breathe.
Mhm.
And then eventually, so it kind of calmed down to where I could handle it. I'm like, okay, I got this.
Mhm.
And I lay on the bed. I was like, I need some rest. I was like, listen, little one, I need some rest.
Mhm.
I need a little bit of rest. Just give me a little break.
Mhm.
I lay my head down on the bed and like my butt is up in the air.
Mhm.
And then I was just thinking, I had read Ina May's book, A Guide to Childbirth,
Mhm.
or no, it was Spiritual Midwifery. I'm sorry.
Okay,
And
yeah.
he had talked about thinking about opening and how it helped a mother, open faster than she'd ever heard anybody do. And so I did that. I was like just thinking to myself, open, 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 open. And in that time, I was able to fall asleep and I got some rest
Mm, no.
and it was nice. It was,
Mm,
and I woke up and I had some heavy contractions and
mm,
my plug came out. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had a few more contractions and I felt like I needed to push. And so my body just kind of pushed for me and my water just like a balloon.
Wow.
And my water just broke. And so I was like, wow. And my husband's like, wow. And I'm like, okay. And then I started feeling a little pushy.
Mm.
So I hadn't told my mom that and I live with my mom. I forgot to mention that. I hadn't
Okay.
told her that I intended to home birth.
Mm-hmm.
I live with my mom and my aunt actually.
Okay.
And I hadn't told her that I intended to free birth, but I didn't want her to miss it. So I told my husband he could wake her up. And this was at about 2 a.m. And she's like, what? We've got to get you to the hospital. And I was like, no. I was like, no, I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm okay. And she's like, but but you're in labor. What do you mean you don't want to go? What are you talking about? And I'm just like, I'm fine. I'm like, I need you to relax. And so she eventually my aunt hears all the commotion and she's like, is she in labor? And she's like, yeah. So my mom walks out of the room. She calls my cousin who's a nurse. She calls my cousin who's a nurse and she's asking her what to do. And she's like, well, if her water's broken, it can't be broken that long. And I was like, it's fine. I'll
Mm-hmm.
be okay. And she's like, we have to get you to the hospital. You can get an infection. Your water's broken. I was like, I'm fine. We gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm walking back and forth, and eventually my aunt, she calls 911.
No, really?
So
Oh.
thankfully, it took them, they didn't take too long to come, but by the time she called 911, I was about ready to push anyway.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was pushing and I checked myself and I thought I felt something hard and I thought it might be the head. So I just asked my husband, I'm like, do you see the baby's head? And he's like, no. I'm like, are you sure? And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
no. And then he's like, oh my God, yes. So he goes to get my mom again.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just start pushing. She's like, oh my gosh. She's like, she said something like, we don't know if the baby can fit. And it kind of, I had heard that in my pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it triggered something in my brain. And so I started pushing a little bit too forcefully, I think.
Okay,
Trying
yeah.
to get the baby out because I'm like trying to kind of prove that the baby can fit and this baby's not huge. Like everybody
Mm.
was worried about the whole everybody was worried about me having gestational diabetes because the baby could be big, the baby could be big. And
Right.
so, it might not fit. And so I just started pushing really, really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I he eventually, I blacked out during pushing. I remember crowning because I felt that burn.
Yeah.
And then I just like blacked out during pushing. I feel like I went somewhere else. Like I went to the
Okay.
other side to get him.
Yeah.
And then I remember hearing his cry. That was the
Oh.
I remember. And
Mm-hmm.
I just like, this is the best sound I've ever heard in my life. Oh my God, my baby is here and okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of leaning on the bed. And so like my mom was actually the one who caught him from behind.
Okay.
So she had to kind of untangle his cord a little. It wasn't like wrapped all around his neck, but I guess it was just kind of like funky.
Mm-hmm.
And she untangled his cord and they eventually handed him to me. And she's like, you have a son. And I was like, oh my God, because I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took him and I was like, the first thing I thought was, I knew it. You look just like your dad.
Aw.
And then also I'm like, this baby is tiny. He
Mm.
was a skinny little baby. He was tiny. He wasn't tiny, he was 7'7",
Yeah.
but he was skinny.
Okay.
And so I'm like, everybody worried me about you being big and you're tiny.
Yeah. And that happens so often with babies, like I was saying too before, when women get their fundal heights checked with the little measuring tape and they say that they're measuring too big, or they get the ultrasound and it says that they're going to have like a 9-pound baby. And then when the baby's actually born, they're just these tiny little, like 6-7 pound normal size, not too big. And it happens so often.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, I knew it. I knew you weren't big.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I would have felt that. I would have felt
Mm-hmm.
taken down.
Totally.
And
Wow.
so, yeah, I was so excited. And the paramedics came soon after that.
Okay. And what was that like? Was it hectic or?
I mean, I guess it could have been, but for me, I was already on my birth high.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm just sitting there like, and and just like a little spacey. So they come in and they're like ready for an emergency. They're just like,
Mm,
so are you ready to go? Are we gonna get you out? You want to go to the hospital? And I was like, no.
mm.
And I feel like they just looked confused. They're like, what? What do you mean? Like, what are we doing here? And
Yeah.
they're like, well, you, uh, are you sure
Mm,
you have the baby? I'm like, yeah, we're fine. I'm sure.
mm,
They're like, okay. So then they're like, well, can we cut the cord? And I was like, I don't want the cord cut yet because I wanted delayed cord,
mm,
cutting.
mm,
And so, anyways, they were like, well, the cord has to be cut. And I didn't feel able to like fight them on that in that moment. And
mm,
so they kind of cut the cord really quickly. And I was
mm.
pretty disappointed by that. But I was like, the cord looked fairly white. So
Yeah.
that's what kind of gave me solace. But I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so, and so then they're like, are you sure? Hey, what's wrong, little lady?
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong, little lady? Huh? Okay. You wanted to sit up? Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, you needed to get that out. Okay. You want more milk or are you all done? You just need a minute to think, huh? Okay, that's okay. You take a moment to think about that. And you can have some more milk if you need. Okay, so they're like, okay, well, can we check the baby? And I was like, sure. And so they look over him and they're like, he looks good. He looks good.
Mm-hmm.
And then they asked me if they can check me out and my blood pressure. I was like, yeah, sure. And my blood pressure was fine. And they're like, okay, well, if you're sure you don't want to go, I was like, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so they had me sign an AMA
Okay. Yeah.
and they have the little blank there where the paramedic is supposed to write what could happen if I don't go. And they wrote death. I was
Seriously. Oh my God.
like that's a little extreme, but okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny at the time. I was just like,
Totally. Wow. It's just so
I'm like,
ridiculous the things that they do in like writing death. Like, oh my gosh. I'm not surprised, but it's just like, wow.
yeah, I think I still have that somewhere because they give you a copy of it. I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
all right. I
Wow.
was like, we actually will probably, because I had intended to go to the hospital later anyway. I still felt a little
Mm,
like I know that there are some things where the baby could be born with low blood sugar and that kind of thing. So I just, and it was my first time. I didn't really,
mm.
I just wanted to get checked out anyway, but I didn't want to go by ambulance. We weren't
Right.
gonna do
Yeah.
that. And also I wanted some rest and maybe
Mm-hmm.
to have a little, I'm like, can somebody get me some orange juice? I
Mm-hmm.
just need a moment.
Yeah,
And so
totally.
they left and my mom's like, okay, so are you ready to go? I was like, no.
Can I just quickly interject? How
Sure.
many EMTs came to the house? Were there a lot of people that came in, or was it just one or two that you were speaking with?
I want to say there were three or four.
Okay. Okay.
And so there was mainly one that spoke with me, but there were a few people just kind of ready to go. And I feel like they were ready. And
Yeah.
I feel like I threw them off by being
Mm.
so calm. They're just like,
Hmm.
what's happening here?
Yeah, totally. What's going on? Why isn't she hysterical? Why isn't there blood everywhere? Why isn't this an emergency situation?
Exactly. I also want to say the guy, he did say he was talking to us about the fact that my placenta needed to come. He's like, it needs to come within about an hour
Mm,
and yada yada. And
okay.
and while he was talking, I felt a contraction, like just a little like twinge, and I was just kind of like,
Mm.
and I felt the need to push, and I gave a little push, and it came. I just went splat.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so I was like, oh well, it's not a problem. It just came.
Hmm.
Like, oh, I think I heard it. And he's like, can I see? Because I was like under a blanket, and I'm like, sure. And he
Hmm.
lifted up the blanket, and he's like, okay, it looks like it's all out. He's like, okay, well, so they really couldn't,
Hmm.
they really didn't have any excuses to like try to like get me to go. Like everything just was already done. And so they're like, okay, I guess we're out.
Yeah. Wow. That's nice because but it seems like that was a very kind of easeful interaction that you had with the paramedics, where some women's stories are very opposite to that, and it's more chaotic and stressful. And yeah, so I'm really glad that, not glad, but like in that experience, it wasn't super stressful for you or for the baby, or, people trying to push you and like, you have to go now and you have to listen to us. It was just very easeful. They seems like they listened to your wishes and your wants, other than cutting the cord sooner than you would have liked. So yeah, that's really nice to hear that you still were able to hold on to that power for the most part in that experience with these people just kind of bursting in right after you gave birth.
For sure. All things considered, I
Mm,
was pretty blessed with that experience because
mm,
honestly, for one, I'm happy that it didn't interrupt the hormonal flow that I was
mm,
feeling. I still felt very calm and very good. And
mhm,
also, yes, I'm happy that I wasn't threatened because sometimes people are. And
mhm.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
I was
Mm,
very blessed with that interaction and everybody was really sweet. I
mhm,
know that like it's not a situation where they were purposely trying to fearmonger me. It's not like, you
yeah.
know, like an evil thing. They just are
Mhm.
like, as far as we know, you have a baby, you need to be at the hospital with
Exactly. Yeah. They don't get training. Like that's a part to the EMS that really they need more training on, like how to enter a house after a woman has just given birth if it's not an emergent situation. Or like they need a special, I've said this before, they need like a special female-led EMS team where women can come in and just be very gentle and kind and like, have you eaten anything? Can I get you something to drink? How are you feeling?
Yes, exactly. But all things considered, it went well. So they
Mm.
left, and my mom's just like, are you ready to go to the hospital? And I'm like, no.
Mm.
I was like, I want to rest.
Mhm.
Would you mind giving me a moment? Let me hand
Yeah.
her back.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I take a nap, I wake up, we go to the hospital. Um, that situation also was pretty chilled. It was a
Mm,
quiet day at the hospital. They didn't have a ton of patients, so I went
mm,
right back to a room.
mm,
The nurse that I got was really, really sweet. She was
mm,
very nice. She asked me a lot of questions. She's like, "Wow, you had the baby?" Because what I told them was that it wasn't planned. The baby came faster than I thought,
mhm.
and I knew better than to
Yeah.
was actually. I was like, "Yeah, the baby came faster than I thought, and I do have midwives." I said that too.
Mhm.
Whatever. And there, she's like, okay. She's like, wow. She's like, you must have a really high pain tolerance in order for you to, have gone through all that at home. And I was like, yeah. I'm like, honestly, and really, truly, I was like, I've had cramps that were worse. In
Mhm.
my younger years, I used to get them really bad, and I actually still feel that way.
Okay, yeah.
And so, but yeah, she was really sweet. The doctor was okay. He was a male, which was
Mm,
not the best, but I was okay with it at the time.
mhm.
And he told me that I had some pretty nice tearing. He didn't tell me the degree,
Okay.
but he did say that I could either get stitches or I could have issues with prolapse later in life. And I was like,
That's interesting to say.
yeah, I was like, the tearing didn't feel that severe. I had it checked. I had the tissue checked out by a midwife later on, and my guess is that it was probably about a second degree. It
Okay.
didn't, it went super, super far.
So did you
Um,
get it stitched in the hospital or you did?
I
Okay.
I got it stitched. They convinced me to give him the eye drops, and I went ahead and gave him vitamin K.
Mm-hmm.
I had been doing research on that in my pregnancy, and I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't really made a decision up until then. And I was just like, I'll just go ahead and let him have it.
Mm-hmm.
And we stayed, and it wasn't too dramatic. The pediatrician that came to check on him,
Mm-hmm.
she was not great. She looked
Um,
like she didn't want to be there.
mm,
They told me that I needed to stay overnight in order to get a newborn hearing screening. I was like, we're not doing that. I'm not going to have us. I was like, I'm ready to go.
yeah.
I'm like, we're not staying overnight for a hearing screening. That doesn't make any sense to me. And my aunt was there and she was trying to convince me to sit. She's like, she told my mom, she's like, tell her he needs that. And I was like, no, he's my baby. I was like, we can get it later. And the pediatrician just snaps at me and goes,
Mm.
well, if there is an issue, you would want to get a specialist immediately. And what I should have asked her is what specialist is going to be open on the weekend.
Right. Wow.
So she wasn't great. I was unhappy to have her be the one to look at my baby, especially like
Mm-hmm.
that, and he's new. But
Yeah.
for the most part, the experience was okay. The nurse, like I said, the nurse was really sweet and she made the experience for me.
Okay, good, good, good. And so how long was that total experience that you were in the hospital for? Just a couple hours then? Because you didn't want to stay the night?
We were there for about 6 hours. They
Okay.
just kind of kept me there. I think that they just kind of wanted to watch me and maybe
Mm.
kind of try to entice me to stay. And I was like, no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, totally. They do. They'll like kind of make up like excuses as to why you need to stay longer. So, but 6 hours, that's not too bad. So, yeah. Wow. May I ask what did you do with your placenta?
So my husband, thank God, we brought it to the hospital for them to look at because the EMT, I think,
Mm-hmm.
he said that we might want to do that just to make sure that everything came out, to make sure
Okay.
that there were pieces left over. And the doctor looked at it and said it looked fine.
Mm.
And then he watched it and he brought it back home and
Nice.
the freezer for me. And I was like, oh my God. Because I was really sad. I was like, oh, they probably just threw it out and I really wanted it. But
Oh,
no,
yeah.
he watched
Uh,
over it.
yes, I love that. Your husband was on placenta duty.
He was.
That's so awesome. Cool.
And I was so thankful. So when my son turned 9 months,
Hmm.
I made placenta prints. I used the blood and I also used food coloring. And I
Hmm.
made all these prints on watercolor paper and on a canvas. We still have them hanging up in the room.
Oh, that's
And the cord,
beautiful.
I made a dream catcher.
No way. Wow.
Mm.
Oh, I love that. I love hearing when women, craft with their placentas and with the cords. It's such a special piece to because the placenta is so sacred. So it's just so lovely to like make a dream catcher and you always get to see that and just remember. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So
Wow.
it was really special.
Mm-hmm.
And after that birth, I was excited. I was like, oh my God, I'm able to do this. That was so
Mm-hmm.
amazing. I was like, it wasn't even that bad. It wasn't as painful as everybody says. I'm like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
get me pregnant again.
How long was your whole birthing experience then, would you say, from the time, I guess from the time that you got home, where it got more into the active birthing stage? How many hours was that? Because it seems like in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that long.
No, he came fast. So I got home around 9, and
Mm,
that's when they were really intense. And I
mm.
had him around, it was 5:59, I think, that he
Okay.
was.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite quick then. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, that was, I can't, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with having a long birth,
Mhm.
but that was a good first birth.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Wow. And then, yeah, because it was such a beautiful experience. You're just like, get me pregnant again. Let's do it again. I love that.
Yeah. I'm like, I want all the kids. I want another one immediately. I wanted them to be close in age.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wanted more kids right
Mm.
away. I did have some trouble breastfeeding, I will say that.
Okay.
The latch felt really like it hurt in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and I had trouble figuring it out. And he wanted to eat a lot, which I guess he was cluster feeding, which I didn't fully understand at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
My mom was like, she's like, he's hungry until you get more milk. Why don't you give him formula? And I eventually gave into that because I was scared that like I'd starve him to death.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I had gotten on a whole thing of formula, and he, was on formula for a while, and I was feeling kind of sad about it. I'm like, but whatever, I don't care. I don't even care anymore. I'm like, we'll
Mm.
just give him the formula. I'm not going to try to breastfeed. This is too difficult. Pumping
Mm.
sucks also. I'm just going to be honest, like having to clean all
Mm-hmm.
those parts,
Yeah.
awful. But
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is not what I want for my baby. I was like, I don't like these ingredients. It's gross. I'm like,
Mm.
let me, no offense to anybody who has to formula feed because sometimes you need it, but
Yeah.
I didn't want that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was Googling all the things and I worked it out and got him
Nice.
off formula. And so I think he was on it until he was about 2.5 months.
Okay.
And then he's still occasionally will nurse.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I love hearing that. That, well, okay. Let me break this down. It's really sad and unfortunate that the input of information to like just formula feed him until your milk comes in was a catalyst to you then formula feeding your baby for the about 2.5 months and you weren't breastfeeding. But it's so beautiful that you did the work and you did research and you came back to the place of, no, I'm going to feed my baby from my breast. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it happen. And you came through that obstacle. So I love hearing that even though like it started off, it was a bit tough and wasn't able to work out in the way that you wanted it to, you like kind of course corrected and were able to feed your baby. So I love hearing that.
Yeah. It was tough. There were some tough
Mm-hmm.
moments there. We
Mm.
live way out, way far out. And so it's
Okay.
hard to get patient consultants and stuff. And so
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it was tough, but I'm happy
Mm-hmm.
that we were able to work it out too, because it
Mm-hmm.
would be a big regret. Even
Mm-hmm.
half months that he had formula is a huge regret for me.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh,
But thank you.
yeah.
So I wanted to have a baby pretty soon. I wanted them to be close in age, but I did not know before having him that it can take a long time for your period to come back. I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea. So for me, it was 15 months. And then after that, it took another 5 or 6 months. I don't know, for me to get pregnant. And but
Okay.
so I was just like, I don't know. I'm like, maybe I have secondary infertility. Maybe I won't be able to have more kids. And that was kind of sad, but I'm like,
Mm.
it's what it is. So when I
Mm.
did get it, so I missed a period,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, okay. And I didn't want to take a test. That's how I wanted to have a fully wild pregnancy this time and not take a
Mm.
test and do all the things.
Yeah.
But because of what had been going on, I was like, there's no way.
Mm.
So I took the test and I took it with my husband in the bathroom, and I was like, I'm not going to be pregnant, but whatever.
Mm.
And I took it and another digital test.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, it says I'm pregnant. I was like, what? So I was super excited, and I'm like, oh my God. I went and made like a little baby registry at Amazon.
Aw.
And I was just like super excited. So I'm a believer in not really saying anything until 12 weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
So I wasn't going to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember I had one day where I had like a little bit of like a scuffle with a family member, and they're like, you they said something like, you better watch the way you're talking to me, something. And the feeling of that felt really like, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a
Yeah.
little superstitious. And so, like, the energy of that felt really kind of off to me.
Yeah. Okay.
And then later that week, I was in the shower and something just said, check your cervix.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why? I was like, I don't need to do that. And it was like, no, just check it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did, and I got blood. I
Mm.
didn't have any bleeding with my son, no implantation bleeding, nothing. And I was
Right.
like, some women have bleeding in pregnancy and it ends up being fine. I was like, maybe it's okay, but I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was using the bathroom one day and I was like, I had a voice in my head that was like, what if you're not even pregnant? What if this is just a long delay between periods? And this is like
Mm.
10, I was like about 10 weeks.
Okay.
And I was like, what a scary thing to think. And so, about when I hit about 11 weeks, I started spotting.
Okay.
Possible that it could still be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and took an HCG test just to kind of see what was going on. I didn't go
Yeah.
through a doctor, I ordered
Okay.
it online
Okay.
so I could just see what the numbers were.
Mm-hmm.
And before I even got the results for that test, um, it I was about 12 weeks
Okay.
and that bleeding picked up.
Okay.
And then then one day I just started cramping. I started
Mm-hmm.
having what felt like about moderate period contraction. I mean, period cramps.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went in the bathroom and I was like, oof.
Mm-hmm.
So I put pads down because I figured what was probably happening. And I
Mm.
squatted down and something just came out.
Wow.
And I was just bleeding, bleeding, bleeding. And I hadn't even like I told you, I live with my mom and aunt, and I hadn't told them I was pregnant. Only my husband knew.
Right.
My son, he was about 2 at the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I just laid down on the couch and my mom helped me with my son. I was just like, oh, I'm not feeling well.
Okay.
So and I forgot to say I'd had a dream that I had two pregnancies. So I had a pregnancy and it didn't complete.
Okay.
I saw the little baby pieces. This was like right before the completion of the miscarriage. And then I had another dream that I had a baby and the baby was healthy.
Okay. Wow.
And so, but I was still holding on to hope that this pregnancy was going to be okay. So
Yeah.
anyways, I completed the miscarriage or the early birth. It was an early birth and a free birth. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
go to the hospital. I didn't, have any
Yeah.
assistance other than having the HCG test.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that. The only interaction I had with the medical system was it was completely over with. I went to like a normal physical afterward and I told the doctor that I had miscarried because I wanted to make sure I didn't have prolapse. I don't know why, but I felt like
Mm-hmm.
everything felt lower somehow.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
she said I didn't, and so everything was okay. And she asked me, she's kind of insensitively, why did you miscarry? And I'm
Seriously.
like, yeah.
Oh.
I'm like, I don't I'm like, I don't know. I didn't have anything tested, which you usually don't have anything tested until you've had two or more anyway. Especially
Mm-hmm.
me, I was 31 at the time, I think.
Okay.
So, yeah, that wouldn't usually be a thing from my understanding. I'm not a doctor, but
Mhm.
from my understanding, they don't usually test until 2 or 3.
And that's like, it doesn't matter. Like, she shouldn't be asking that question. Why did you miscarry? That's awful. That's an awful thing to say to a woman that has just experienced a pregnancy loss.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Ugh,
And so, again, if anybody has any questions out there, why not just go through the medical system?
that's why.
There have been interactions here that'll clue you into why.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Totally.
I was upset naturally. I was really sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like my husband wasn't I felt like he didn't give me the response that I wanted. Like it was really early. He hadn't heard a heartbeat. He hadn't felt the baby kick. So he didn't have the same amount of grief that I did.
Right. Yeah.
And so obviously nobody can control their reaction. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
sitting here blaming him. But for me at the time, I was just like, why are you not more like totally like blown out by this? Like I'm just
Yeah.
like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a bit of a thing. And I was just like, well, maybe I won't be able to have more kids. I had
Okay.
heard the messaging from this baby that I wasn't ready. I wasn't the
Okay.
one. I was the one who wasn't ready. That
Okay. Yeah.
I should together
Mm-hmm.
before she comes through, because she's going to, I heard the message that she was a girl,
Mm-hmm.
and that when she comes through that she is going to need me to have it together. So I need to do that.
Wow.
But
I
that
love
she would,
hearing that you had that connection with her. That's so beautiful.
yeah. But I didn't fully believe it. I was like, I don't know. I was like, maybe I just can't have more kids.
Mm.
So it took a full year
Mm.
from the miscarriage.
Mm.
And then when I conceived
Mm.
her,
Mm-hmm.
I had kind of a vision during the conception
Mm.
that like I like died and became everything and then was reborn. It's kind of hard to explain, but
Okay.
it was interesting. And so I was just, and then I feel like I saw a flash of light.
Mm.
And afterward, I asked my husband, I feel like I experienced that. I was like, do you think I might be pregnant? And he's like, I don't know. Like, I just didn't think anything of it until I missed my period. And I was like, oh, it's just a day. I was like,
Mm.
in denial. And I was like, oh, it's another day. It's
Mm-hmm.
5 days. And I was like, I don't have any symptoms yet. And then I
Mm.
started feeling a little queasy at about what would be about 6-ish weeks.
Mm.
And I was like, ah. And so here's the crazy thing. I didn't tell him.
Okay.
I didn't tell him. I experienced all the, like my first trimester. I did not let him know. I,
Wow.
yeah, I decided to keep it private. Something in me told me that I would probably go ahead and keep it private this time, that I
Mm.
wouldn't let anybody know, that
Mm.
I just needed it to be me.
Mm.
Part of the reason for that is boundaries. Like I knew I wanted a wild pregnancy and I knew I wanted a free birth. And
Mm.
I didn't want to be fighting anybody on my choices or trying to explain my choices. I
Yeah.
didn't want to do that. I wanted that to be mine. Also, if anything happened to this pregnancy, I wanted the freedom
Mm.
to decide what I needed to do in whatever way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I forgot to say that with my early birth, like right before I got pregnant, something told me that it was time to let go, because I had like buried the remnants of it in like this little flower pot
Mm.
in soil, and I had just been keeping it in our room.
Okay.
And something told me it was time to let it go and it was time to bury it. So my husband had
Um,
these flowers, and during a full moon, I had buried the remnants under that flower. I had like taken that, I buried it, and then I put the flowers on top
mm-hmm.
and then mashed the pot.
Mm.
And you know, I was like,
Wow.
okay, I'm gonna trust that. And so,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, so I got pregnant again. Didn't let him know. I experienced morning sickness, but I kind of feel like my morning sickness may have been more psychological and to comfort me than anything,
Okay.
because I experienced it with my son, very light. It wasn't anything crazy. I never threw up. It was just a little like feeling like a little like ugh.
Mm.
But I feel like it more psychologically comforted me, because when I wouldn't feel it, I'd be like, oh no, it's happening again. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm losing the baby again. I was like, I just have to let it go. And then I'd get sick and I'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, the baby's there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I went to Spirit Weavers. Do you know what that festival is?
I do. I would love to go to that. I'm hoping maybe next year I can join the gathering.
Oh, it was so great. I went with a
Mm.
friend of mine and with my son when I was
Mm.
about 12 weeks along.
Mm-hmm.
And so still nobody knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a thick woman. So it's like with the beginning showing, it was like it could either be that like, oh, she's getting a little extra chub, or it could be that like,
Okay.
maybe she's pregnant.
Yeah.
So so I went with them, and I remember my husband drove us to Oregon, and he stayed in Oregon because I wanted him to be close to help with my son in case,
Okay.
just
Yeah,
in case.
that makes sense.
And so one of the night we met up with him part way during the gathering and just, he got to see my son and everything. And part of the way through, I was like, they're having, I think it was like an Indian inspired dish. And I usually love Indian food. And I was like, I don't know why they're doing that. I was like, that sounds so gross. And he was like, "Mm." And then I think I said a couple other things like that. I think I probably was kind of hinting at it because I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you haven't figured it out yet. I haven't taken a drink. I had not a glass of wine, nothing. And so later on, like after my friend had left, we went back to Oregon for my husband. He had a work trip and he brought us with him.
Mm.
And so I said something else about some kind of food grossing me out. And he's like, okay, you're making it really obvious. He's like, are you pregnant? And I started laughing. I was like, huh, actually, yes.
Mm.
And so he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. I'm about exiting my first trimester. And he's
Mm.
like, oh. And I was like, I'm sorry I didn't tell you before now. I was like, I just needed the space. And he's like, I get it. He's like, I know why. He's like, I understand. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Because
Mm.
I just needed that space.
Mm-hmm.
But I was happy that he finally knew because I didn't tell anybody, no friends, no family, nothing.
Okay.
And I took my little progress pictures in the week every week,
Mm.
but I didn't tell anybody. And I tried to hide my food aversions because I had a lot with her. I love I love all kinds of food and like Thai, Indian, anything that seemed exotic for
Mm-hmm.
me, not part of, my culture necessarily. She was like, no. Fruit that seemed exotic, dragon fruit, any mango. I love mango. She's like, no. I couldn't eat it was like very basic, like American food is what she wanted.
Okay.
And so I became a meat and potatoes kind of a girl. And actually, usually I love beef. I like chicken more with her. It was just
Mm-hmm.
like totally just flipped everything that I like.
Wow.
And so yeah, I tried to hide my food aversions and everything. But when I got to like my mid second trimester, my mom started kind of being like, she's like, you having a baby? And I was like, are you calling me fat? And she's like, mm. And so this time around, with the knowledge of the fact that I might have an issue with insulin resistance, I tried to watch my diet a little bit more. I
Mm.
was not perfect. I had desserts here and there. I had some Cheetos, I'm going to be honest. And I want to be honest about that because of the fact that I feel like a lot of the time you hear free birth stories and it's from people who like they do yoga every day, they run 3 miles, they're like eating all of the best things, and you're just like, so it might be like, can I do that? But
Mm.
I was not perfect. I did have some insulin resistance. I'm a heavy girl. Um and
Mm. You're
I
just
feel
being
like
realistic, that's just every
yeah.
now and then you gotta have some dessert and some Cheetos, and that's okay.
Exactly. But yeah, but I tried to watch it more and I actually did monitor myself with finger sticks. And my numbers were actually a lot better than they were with my son. And I was tired with her. I was tired. I was like out of breath from the moment I found out that she was there. I was huffing and puffing. And I just felt like I needed to sit down all the time. I'm like, but I have to be active because that's healthy. And I was just like, she's just like, sit down, sit all the way down. But the ways that I tried to keep myself active were I was trying to get up in keeping with circadian wellness. I
Oh
was trying
yeah.
to get up before the sun came up
Mm-hmm.
and look at the sun as it came up.
Mm-hmm.
And I did yoga outside in our yard.
Mm.
There's a YouTube channel called the Cypress School of Holism. I think that's what it's called. And she does like she has a video of a prenatal yoga routine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Khalsa Way Kundalini yoga practice.
Okay.
And I would do that, and it contains squats. There were squats in that practice, and it's such a beautiful practice. And she has a beautiful voice, and it
Mm,
was so nice. I did that most mornings,
okay.
and it was great. And so I would do that, and then I'd come in and I'd try to cook breakfast because I do it before I ate breakfast. And a lot of the time I'd be like, oh, I gotta sit down. Like my eggs would be cooking on the stove, and I'd like have a seat for a second. I'd be like, but I made it through. And also I would dance. I'd do like the cha-cha slide and the Cupid shuffle and
Nice. Oh, I
did the
love
Tootsie
that.
Roll. And so that was my way of like staying active because believe it or not, dancing, I wasn't out of breath.
Okay. Wow.
And so yeah, I would do that. I do that with my son, and I do that with my mom sometimes, and my husband would join in sometimes. And it was a fun way of staying active.
Hmm.
But yeah. And so anyways, that was what happened during that point in my pregnancy. So eventually I got big enough to where I had to let my mom know. So
Hmm.
when I was about 30 weeks along, I was like, I know that it's so surprising to you, but I'm pregnant. She's like, obviously. And she's like, I don't know why you would hide that from me. And I was like, oh, I just I was like, I'm not hiding it or keeping it a secret. I was like, I needed privacy.
Mm, mhm.
And so I didn't tell her my birth plans.
Okay.
And so my pregnancy was mostly wild, except for me checking my blood sugar. And I went to a midwife once. So, a midwife that I had gotten a well woman check from, I called her and asked her if she would be willing to give me a pregnancy confirmation
Okay.
because it makes it easier to get the birth certificate.
Mm,
And so I went in, and she was so great. She was like, obviously, I went in at like 28 weeks.
mm.
And she's like, obviously, you're pregnant. And she's like,
Yeah.
and I was like, whatever you need to do to give me the letter and keep your license, I'm cool with, obviously, except for Doppler.
Mm.
And she's like, okay. She's like, I can check with the fetoscope if you'd like. She's like, have you heard the heartbeat yet? And I was like, no. I was like, I can't use fetoscopes. I'm like, we have one. I don't get it. It doesn't work for me. And
Mm.
I'm like, I can't palpate. It freaks me out. I tried. Like, no. And my
Okay.
husband doesn't like it either. He's like, no, we're gonna hurt the baby. Don't do that.
Oh.
So she palpated. She just goes in and she just was whoop, and she grabs the baby's head. She's like, well, baby's head down. I was like, okay, that actually was really nice and reassuring to know.
Mhm.
And she's like, okay. She's like, all right, there's a baby there. She's like, it feels about like 29 weeks. And I was like, okay, I was thinking I was about 28 weeks. And she told me she felt what she did the fetoscope, and she's like, maybe if I find the heartbeat I can let you listen. And she did the fetoscope, and then it ended soon.
Mm.
And she's like, oh, it seems like the baby turned their back to me.
Mm.
So my daughter, when she was in my belly, she did not want to be checked on.
Okay.
There
Yeah.
was the time where I thought about doing blood tests or things here and there, and she was like, no, don't check on me. I don't want to be
Mm.
checked on. And I thought maybe that was in my head, but I
Mm.
realized that no, it's really her when she turned her back to that midwife.
Yeah, totally.
She's like, I told you I'm fine. No.
Hmm.
I'm like, okay. So yeah, she was really, really sweet. She didn't charge us for the visit. She's
Mm.
like, I'll send you the letter in a couple weeks. She's like, you should get it in a couple weeks. And there you go. You're good. She's like, you came all the way out here. It's not a big deal. I barely did anything. And I was like, thank you so much. I was so
Hmm.
appreciative toward her. And she really showed up for me in the way that like I needed, the way
Yeah.
that like you would want a midwife to show up for you, doing
Hmm.
only what you specifically are okay with and consent to.
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
that's more.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. That's so nice to hear.
It was. And so yeah, so the rest of my pregnancy went well. I felt good except for being crazy tired and out of breath. And then I guess I'll get to the birth.
Yeah.
So the day, let's see, it was a Saturday when I went into labor, but that day I was just like, we have to clean up. I'm like, we've got to get everything cleaned up.
Mm.
And I just wanted to do laundry and stuff. And my mom took my kid out, my older kid out to an amusement park. And so we were at home, we got some laundry done and we're cleaning up. I'm crawling around because I'm so tired, but I'm like, I have to do it. And so we did that, and then we were intimate because I was like, it's like it'll probably be a while. So, and everyone's out
Mm.
of the house. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like, I'm far enough along. I was 37 weeks. I'm like, this could make the baby come. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, okay. So, that happened. And then eventually, like later that night, my son comes home, we eat dinner, whatever. And I was just kind of like feeling a little spacey, and I was just like rolling around on my yoga ball.
Mm.
I accidentally fall asleep on the couch. I wake up at 1 in the morning or 12 in the morning and feel just a little crampy. I go to the room, I wake my husband up. I'm like, I'm so sorry to wake you up. I know it's early in the morning. I was like, I think I might feel something. I'm like, it might be nothing. Don't panic. I might feel something.
Mm.
And so he goes, okay. So he just starts just flying around, getting everything together. He starts putting pictures on the wall that I wanted. He's like, let me get the pad, the incontinence pads. I had cloth ones. And he's like, okay. And I'm just sitting there and I'm rocking and I'm just like listening to India Irie, I'm Light. I'd been listening to that my whole pregnancy, and I
Mm.
listened to some other stuff. And he when I stopped being able to put the music on for myself, he found a really nice meditative song and
Mm.
put it on, like it played for about 3 hours.
Mm.
And I didn't even notice that I had stopped controlling it. I was just like, oh, that's nice. And I'm rocking. And then all of a sudden the contractions feel huge, like
Mm.
ripping me apart huge.
Mm.
And I was like, oh God. I'm like, these are painful. Like with my son, I wouldn't class those contractions as painful, but these were painful. It felt like I was being ripped apart. And all I could do, like with him, all I could do was run around. With her, I just wanted to lay in bed
Mm.
and sit there until the contractions hit me like a ton of bricks.
Wow.
And then they were ripping me open, and then I'd kind of like shake my butt throughout the contractions, and that helped me it helped with the pain a little bit.
Mm.
And then I had to calm back down. And then I was kind of breathing through them, and I was a lot more vocal with her. I was huge
Mm.
moaning. So at one point I was just like, my water hasn't even broken yet. I was like, I wonder if I'm going to be in prodromal labor for like 3 weeks. I was like, oh
Mm.
my God, I can't take this for 3 weeks. I'm like, what's gonna happen? And I lay down, and my water just like, it felt like somebody poking a hole in a gallon bottle. Like
Okay.
it didn't like pop like last time. It was like kind of like going do 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 do, like kind
Okay.
of
Yeah.
way. And I was trying to tell my husband that my water broke, but I couldn't speak. I was just like and then he just like, he lifts up the covers and he's like, oh, your water broke. I'm like, I know. And so I was like, okay, so I guess it won't be 3 weeks. And I was just like, it felt like it had like this was a span of an hour, but after watching my birth video that I have, it was probably about 10 or 12 minutes.
Okay.
I was like, oh, I was like, okay, baby, baby, baby. I was like, I either need a break or you gotta come.
Mm.
I was like, I need a break. Mommy needs a rest. I got a
Mm.
little bit of a rest, and
Mm.
then the contraction started again, really
Mm.
strong.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, I was like, I know what I need to do. I was like, I have to do the hard work. I jump off the bed, not jump, but
Yeah.
I hop off the bed a little. I squat down on the floor. I feel her head. I couldn't help but push. I give one huge push, and she head and body just fly out. So I was supporting her head,
Yeah.
and her body just kind of flopped on the floor. I was in a really low squat.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
And I'm like, and my husband just goes, he just goes, be careful. And I was like, wrong? And I like, because I was in kind of an animal state, I wasn't fully paying attention. So I look, and her cord is just like a graduation cord, just kind of around her neck like that. And I was like,
Mm.
oh. So I unwrap it and then I just pick her up and I was like, baby's here.
Oh, I love that. Wow.
Everything just kind of came full circle. We didn't have paramedics rushing in. My mom, she actually, like, she came in and out of the room during the labor, but in a much more, I'm sure she was nervous, but it was
Mm.
in a more like hands off way than it
Mm-hmm.
was previously.
Okay.
And so I recovered that. I got to catch my baby. We didn't cut
Mm.
her cord until 6 or 7 hours later.
Yeah. Wow.
And I got to hold my baby first.
Oh. Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And it just seems, even though you're saying the contractions, the sensations that you were feeling were really big and intense, but it just was like so simple. You just followed your body. You knew it, there was that point where you just needed to get up and be a bit more active. And there you go. You just, yeah, squatted and were able to catch your baby. And oh, I just love that. That's so beautiful.
It was so beautiful. And oh my God, it felt so good to be the first one to hold her. And I just
Mhm.
held her and held her.
Mm.
I was like, nobody touch her.
Oh, wow. And was your son in the room or was he sleeping? Because this was in the early mornings. Or did
So
he
we
just come in
actually
after?
we have a bed in the room for him. So we
Okay.
co-sleep, but our bed is like a queen.
Yeah.
And so it started getting crowded because he's getting big. And so we got him a little bed in the room.
Yeah.
And so when he heard her cry, he
Mm.
jumps on the bed and he goes, is that little brother or little sister?
Oh, that's so sweet. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
that's
was really
beautiful.
cute. Yeah. And after I gave birth to her, he was just on the bed. He's like, oh my gosh. And he's looking and all excited. And then I'm like, okay, get off the bed. I'm tired. Let them let them make the
Oh,
bed so I can lay down.
yeah. Oh, wow. And then, did you say how long it took for your placenta to come out this time?
I want to say I want to say it came out maybe within the hour.
Okay.
I can't remember how long because time feels a little funky, but
Mm,
it was hard. It was harder to get it out this time. I actually
okay.
had to kind of pull on the cord.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
that's
nothing crazy. It wasn't like, 3 or 4 hours. Not that
mm,
that would be, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I was ready for
mm-hmm.
it to come. Like you got
Okay.
it.
Yeah. Okay. So you did it. Yeah. Just to finish the whole birth process. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. And then you cut the cord about 6 hours later. And what did you do with that placenta? Did you make some art with it as well?
It's in the freezer. I want to do the
Okay.
same thing, have a ceremony when she turns 9 months. I like
Oh,
the
okay.
idea of it, of like her being out as long as she was in.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Oh, that's so beautiful. Both of your birth stories are just so just easy. They just seem, just so easeful. That you just did it, you birthed your babies. And I love the fact that I think you said your son, he was born at 37 weeks as well, was
He
it?
was born 38, almost 39,
Okay, 38, almost 39, but your daughter was born at
like
37.
37 and a half.
Okay, yeah. See, and that would have been with your son, um, how you had the kind of red flag of the gestational diabetes. If you were working with a medical midwife, it would have been, we need to induce, or we need to just cut your baby out of you and give you a cesarean section. And like you said, he was just a skinny little 7 pound thing. There was nothing wrong. And then with
Yeah.
your daughter coming at 37 weeks, that also, if you were in the medical system, would have been a big, oh my gosh, this baby's coming way too quote unquote early. We need to, either induce or we need to just cut this baby out right away and get it in the NICU and like all of this crazy stuff where it's no, neither of those babies needed anything except to just be in their mother's arms and be held, and they're totally fine.
Exactly. I mean, they honestly, with him, even like they couldn't really even make up an excuse to keep us in the hospital. They couldn't even like come up with a reason to scare me to stay.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing was the hearing test, or like, are you sure you don't want to be monitored overnight? And I'm like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't.
And to be honest, like a hearing test, like it doesn't need to be done right away for babies because it's like right, like baby, you don't need to test that immediately after birth. That can be done a few days, a week later. It's not as though these babies, like, yes, it's nice that they can hear their mother's voice, but also when they're just so connected to mother skin to skin in the breastfeeding journey, like that's enough. And then when you feel ready, you can go out and then do the hearing test. But it's not as though it's like it needs to be done immediately or else the whole world's going to end because this child didn't have their hearing test right away.
Exactly. It definitely wasn't a reason to spend the night in the hospital. Sorry, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Wow. Oh, and this breastfeeding journey, how was this for you? Was it just smooth right from the get-go or yeah?
it was smooth. She's a hungry baby. She started cluster feeding pretty much immediately.
Okay.
And yeah, my milk came in quickly with both of them.
Okay.
It was just the issue of I think me not understanding what cluster feeding was and the pain. I didn't have the
Okay.
pain this time around though. It
Okay.
was it was simple.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah, I'm just so in love with your stories. They're just so,
Thank
so
you.
beautiful and just show how when a woman trusts her intuition, trusts her body, and listens to her baby, because you had such beautiful connections with both of your children, just guiding you along the way. Like birth can just be that easy and that graceful. And yeah, that just fills my heart with so much joy. So thank you so much for sharing those two stories with me.
No problem. I'm happy to share from somebody that is imperfect. I am not a
Mhm.
perfect yogi, perfectly zen, or have a perfect diet and practice.
No, I love that. And that's just the realness of who you are. You're just a real woman, a real mother, and you did this thing. And it's just, yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you just did it in the way that was best for you. And I absolutely love that.
Thank you.
Mhm. Is there anything else that you want to share about your two pregnancy and birth experiences, or even on the experience of the early pregnancy release, or do you feel complete with that?
I think I mostly feel complete. The only thing I do want to say is I feel like there's kind of a thing both in the medical space and sometimes in the free birth space about not having expectations around birth,
Mm,
which I think means that you have to really, really go with the flow. I feel like I felt that way a little bit too much in my first
mm,
pregnancy with my son to where
mhm.
like at first I wanted to be responsible for my pregnancy and then I kind of handed it over.
Okay.
I feel like you can have expectations, like expectations to be treated with kindness and with care. I feel like you can plan for your birth to be very beautiful
Mhm,
and you can, have expectations around, like, for instance, delayed cord clamping and everything without having attachment. And I feel like
mhm,
that's the difference. So I
mm,
feel like there's this thing in the medical system where it's like, just let us do our jobs because you don't know how birth is going to go. You don't know anything. And I feel like sometimes in the free birth space, it's like, all you need is a towel and you'll be okay. And I feel like there's got to be a middle ground for that.
totally.
Like, be prepared and, have the things and have kind of like your wishes and desires. There's nothing wrong with that. I feel like just don't have too much attachment because you really don't know how birth is going to go, if
Exactly.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because it's true. Yeah, birth can just be very beautiful, simple, and very easy, but sometimes things happen and your plans may change. Maybe it's a little, maybe it's a lot. And yeah, holding on to that expectation of it has to exactly be this way can sometimes create more like stress and more of that ill feeling towards oneself. From what I've heard, I haven't experienced this, but from what I've heard from some others, which is totally also a total normal thing. But yeah, just kind of being more in the flow of like, it's okay if this doesn't maybe turn out exactly how I wanted it to be. It doesn't have to be the be all end all of that pregnancy and birth experience for the most part, depending on what it is. Obviously, some things are really more awful and traumatic. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. And one last thing, would you like to share any contact information or way maybe a woman would like to speak to you about your pregnancy and birth journeys and just get a bit more, talk to you even just to see like how you did it? Because you said you're in California. So I don't know if, yeah, like, would you like to share how women could reach out to you if they want?
Totally. So my Instagram is smoking Miss Tran. Um, I'll send you the actual thing because I always forget where the
Mm.
underscore is.
Yeah, no worries.
It's smoking Miss Tran, and yeah, you could DM me
Mm.
and ask me any questions if you like. I honestly don't post much, but I look at stuff all the time. So if you
Mhm.
DM me something, I will definitely see it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, April, for spending this time with me. It's just been so beautiful to hear your stories. And yeah, I just love hearing how beautiful and easeful, especially for your first pregnancy and birth experience, how you just created something so wonderful and birthed your son and then went back in and birthed your daughter. And it was just a piece of your life that wasn't stressful or an emergency or anything of that sort.
Thank you again for hosting me. I appreciate it. It's so
Mm.
important hearing these stories. I listened during my pregnancy with my daughter. Her name is Rivka, by the way. I just realized I don't think I said that. During my pregnancy with Rivka, I listened to all the stories. I love.
Oh, good. Yeah, and that's what I want. I want this to be a space for women to come here, to listen to their stories, to share their stories, and so that it just becomes this beautiful, curated anthology of women standing in their power and can be celebrated and can have their voice amplified for the very normal, natural, innate process of pregnancy and birth. Thank you so much, women, for listening to this latest episode of the Free Birthing in Color movement. If you want to continue supporting this movement and all that comes with it, please give a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Like the videos on YouTube and share this episode with some of your friends. As reciprocity for the work that I'm doing and the content that I'm creating, it only takes 2 minutes to show your support through a 5-star rating, a small written review, and a share. If you want to give a monetary donation to help with the back end costs of keeping everything that is happening within this movement going, you can send your donations through PayPal via the link in the show notes. And again, as reciprocity for the work that I'm doing and creating, I'm so grateful when those donations come through. I have many other avenues of work that I've created, such as Portals of Wisdom, which are educational guidebooks for women to reclaim and remember their personal bodily sovereignty. I have one-to-one activation sessions and one-to-one or group mentorship opportunities, as well as an amazing course called Cyclical Woman that is a deep dive into the natural cycles of Mother Earth and connecting into your internal rhythms in relation to where Mother Earth is at any given moment. And lastly, I want to mention again the Free Birthing in Color community. It is open for enrollment, so please, if you want to create a deeper sense of connection to myself and other women navigating the same phase of life that you're in, please, please, please come and join us and let's create something truly beautiful in there. All information can be found within the show notes below, or you can go to primalwomanportal.com and you'll find everything that you need. I'll see you in the next episode.